Zidane Danny, Electro Ninja here, and welcome back to Electro Ninja's Lab. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Basically, the plan was that today you were going to get one video originally, and that was going to be my reactions of basically everything that happened with the PlayStation 5 reveals. Um, Basically me talking about certain things and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things I was going to do with it, but there wasn't much in there that was actually really interesting, making it only be two things that were really, truly interesting to me. Well, technically three things, but one of those wasn't new. The things that were new, well, one, you're seeing behind me as we speak, and that is Final Fantasy 16. And the other thing is the Kingdom, or not the Kingdom Hearts, the Hogwarts Legacy, which I'm going to be making a video of, and that will be showing up in later today in a future video that's coming out soon. Um, but right now, I'm going to be talking about Final Fantasy 16. Oh my gosh. So the thing is that um yesterday, well, not yesterday, the day before yesterday, for you guys, uh Sewer Bar Buns, another uh YouTuber gamer, you know it. If you know who I'm talking about, you know who I'm talking about. But basically, she ran a poll over on Twitter, basically asking people if they thought that Final Fantasy 16 was going to be showing up in the PlayStation reveal thingy, um, the PlayStation Live event, and the majority of the people basically said no, and it was honestly amazing to see that this was the first frickin' thing that actually got to show up. Now, a few things to actually keep in mind. The first thing is that when I was first watching this, uh, two thoughts were kind of jumping in my head. Basically, one, is this looks very similar to 15, and then two, this looks very similar to 14, just due to certain factors with just certain things. Like, uh, honestly, this kind of looked like it was going to be a 14 thing for a certain bit, basically maybe remaking it for a bit. Or maybe this was going to be an announcement for the next expansion, which honestly that would be really early, but it kind of just jumped at me because of a few things, but specifically the Dragoon that shows up and a few other things as well. But meanwhile, it also reminds me of 15, just due to how much in here just there's the teleportation that the main character appears to have. It appears that summons will not actually be as big of a player as previous Final Fantasies. Basically, if you guys don't know, Final Fantasy 15 had summons, but they were extremely rare and only showed up here and there. Most of the time, you wouldn't actually be seeing much about them until a while later. Um, which is fine, but yeah. And you were rarely ever going to be summoning them in a battle except for big boss fights. And really, the biggest point where you would be summoning them was required moments where you were required to summon them, specifically Shiva at the end, and I believe Bahamut was also one of them that you actually had to summon as well. Um, and then with 14, there really aren't anything to do with summons. There's basically the primals, which are basically taking the summons, and basically they're giant boss fights that you fight in a very big group, and most of the time they're pretty evil. But that one had basically all of them, and it's we still haven't seen all of them, so keep that in mind as well. But as for my actual thoughts on what we can see in Final Fantasy 16, honestly, I'm imagining that this is going to be primarily a one-player experience, or one character experience. Basically, you're going to be playing as one of two main characters. The guy that you're kind of seeing on screen now, um, who will probably be the main character, and then the guy with the mark on his cheek. I don't know who he is, but he looks like he's going to be very important to the story as well. Um, and I honestly do feel like both of those characters are going to have some pretty important roles. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if by the end of at the end of the game somewhere, you actually have both of them in your party, and you can basically swap out which one you want to play as. Um, and as for everything else, I'm honestly kind of doubting that there's going to be any party, which is honestly a pretty big departure for this for the Final Fantasy series. Uh, if you've played any Final Fantasy, you know that basically the only ones where you're not playing in a group, like all or a group of people, a group of NPCs, basically all the time, is, well, Final Fantasy 14 and 11, which, plain and simple, those are very different just because of the fact that they're MMOs. But this one does honestly feel like it's very similar to 15 in the aspect where you're basically only playing as one character and not really having any allies. However, I do think that by the end of the game, you will have some extra party members. Specifically, I think that boy, Joshua, who you see every now and again, I do think that he's going to join the party, as well as both of the two guys are also going to be in the party. And basically, all three of those three characters are constantly going to be in there. And Joshua is basically going to be your healer. Meanwhile, depending on who you choose to play as, you'll either be playing as this guy, or you'll playing as the other guy, which is this guy. Both of which will basically just swap between, and you can choose which one. Otherwise, they're basically just fighting in the background, fighting other bad guys around you. Kind of similar to what your party members did in Final Fantasy 15 again. So there's that. As for, again, gameplay looks very, very similar to 15's gameplay. Basically, it looks like you're going to be doing magic in a similar format, maybe slightly different because you can't really see the combat system very precise in this, which I do think is kind of a downfall of the game, but it's not the worst thing ever. But since we can't see it precisely, I'm more leaning towards the fact that more than likely the magic systems are going to be basically the exact same. You basically press a button and then you press up, down, right, or left, and then it will cast the magic. Except that unlike in 15, where you had to build up the amount of magic that you had, in this you won't necessarily have to build up your orbs. Instead, you'll just always have that magic once you learn it, or something along those lines. Honestly, I'm hoping that it's similar to Kingdom Hearts, but it honestly does look very... The gameplay is so fast-paced that I can't imagine it not being like Final Fantasy 15. As for summons, I did actually mention this briefly but the way it's looking, there will not be actual full summons that you summon in battle most of the time in this game. I do think that there will still be some, but it's going to be pretty minor. Likely only being Ifrit and Phoenix. Mostly because of the fact that you can actually see your main character, specifically this scene, is summoning Phoenix multiple times. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if the other character is the one who summons Ifrit. Mostly because the fact that both of those two actually appear on the cover page. So, yeah. Honestly, I'm really intrigued to see how it goes. Um, I also want to look more to see more of who the enemies are. We have seen a little bit here and there, but honestly, not too much. Um, so it all remains to be seen, unfortunately. But anyways, guys, I'm curious to know what you guys think of this whole situation down in the comments below. Uh, so of course, tell me your thoughts and theories down in the comments below. If you are going to leave a theory, make sure to say theory review somewhere in your comment. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and ring that notification bell. And if you want to support the channel even more, then definitely head down to the description and check out all of our links down there, including our Patreon, which a big thank you to our current patron, Sheeny. And before I go, just a reminder that later today at about noon, I should be releasing my other video, which of course is the one on the Harry Potter game. But anyways, guys, I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys soon. But on!